Hello, I'm Carl Seibert. Thanks for joining me. In this video, we're going to take a look at working with metadata, including the metadata that we need to drive the new features in Google Images in Adobe Photoshop. So why, you might ask yourself, am I doing a video on working with metadata in Adobe Photoshop? Well, to get all Edmund Hillary about it, it's because it's there. And we should probably point out that George Mallory actually said that first, but George Mallory died on the mountain, never made it to the top, and on top of everything else, Edmund Hillary gets credit for his quotes. That's just life. But seriously, Adobe Photoshop is in fact just there, and it's kind of likely to be in front of you while you're working on a picture. And you might want to get your captioning done, apply your metadata to that picture right there in Adobe Photoshop, and yes, you can actually do that with some limitations. Photoshop writes really nice industry standard metadata. It's high quality, it's readable by any program that supports industry standard metadata, and it'll do a fine job as long as we keep a couple of limitations in mind. Let's look for a moment at the bigger picture situation. While it's always been really important to put metadata on your photos, your name, your contact information, your copyright notice, and of course a caption, so that the world knows and you know later what's in your photo. But today, there are some interesting developments coming from Google that are very positive for photographers. Google is now supporting, in some very meaningful ways, embedded metadata on pictures. Let's take a quick look. So here we are looking at a Google Images preview page. And look what we have here. Right on the front of this Google Images preview, in a conspicuous place, we have a couple of metadata fields from this picture. Here we see the creator, the photographer of this picture, a woman named Melissa Renwick, and we see the copyright notice for this picture, the Canadian Press in this case. And we could see here, and I actually recommend this right in the copyright notice, we could even see some rudimentary contact information. I kind of highly recommend that. If an honest person comes on this picture in Google Images, they're going to see at a glance who made the picture and who the picture belongs to. And if there's some rudimentary contact information there, like your website URL or a phone number, that means they can get in touch with you to seek permission to use the picture if that's what they want to do. And of course, as a photographer, we want to support the behavior of honest people. We particularly want to support the behavior of honest people who want to pay us a licensing fee. Also, here on this preview page, we have the IPTC credit field. IPTC credit is kind of a tricky field. I suppose the best way to illustrate what it is by example. If you see a byline for a picture on a news site, for example, let's say it says Joe Radel, Getty Images. Well, Joe Radel is the name of the photographer. That's in the creator field in our IPTC metadata. Getty Images would be the credit. It's the organization that's responsible for the distribution of the picture, or maybe responsible for the picture itself. It's not an immutable concept in this particular case, and Google Images pretty obviously got this picture from an NBC News page. NBC News is a member of the Associated Press. They get the picture from the Associated Press. The Associated Press, in turn, got the picture in a content sharing arrangement from the Canadian Press. So originally, the credit for this picture would have read the Canadian Press. I mention this mostly to illustrate the idea that most of us don't even need to worry about that field at all. If we don't use it, Google certainly won't mind, and life will just be much simpler. Now, this screenshot dates from the spring of this year. A couple of years ago, actually, Google started to support these three metadata fields, but they buried them beneath a very inconspicuous link in Google Images. Beginning this year, they've come right up front with it, and clearly they're signaling their enthusiasm for more support for metadata, more support for the idea of knowing who is responsible for a picture and to whom the picture belongs. Kudos to Google for doing that. This is great news for photographers. But there's more. This is a Google publicity handout of their new Licensable feature. Now, what Licensable is going to be, And this feature is still in beta at the moment, so we haven't seen it live in the real world. But the idea is pretty simple. And Google has, in fact, actually done this in other areas. They have badges in Google Images for other things, for products and such things as that. I guess actually pictures could be a product too. Anyhow, here we see a badge on the thumbnail of this Google Images return for this demo picture. And the idea is that if you want to license a picture and you find a picture in Google Images that has a licensable badge, you can click through and it will connect you directly to the photographer, maybe even directly to an e-commerce page where you could buy your license right there. So again, this is fabulous news for photographers. Now, of course, you don't have to have this badge, but if you want it, it's very easy to get. All you have to do is properly fill out a couple of fields in your metadata, and you'll have the badge. Now, all this Google Images goodness, displaying your name and your copyright notice and this badge thing, are all dependent on a couple of things. One is really pretty obvious. You have to do your metadata. The other precondition for this to work, the website that displays your image, and we could be talking about your own website here, has to not destroy the metadata that's on your image. It's got to still be there when Google picks it up. There's good news on that front too. In the last couple of years, millions more websites that used to destroy metadata have changed, and they're now in the much more socially conscious position of preserving it. Of course, that includes websites specifically for photographers, portfolio sites like PhotoShelter or Zenfolio or SmugMug. Most recently, the photographer-centric web hosting company Squarespace responded to concerns from the photography community, and they changed their code. And now all those Squarespace websites, I believe there's at least a couple of million, are supporting metadata. If you have a website, you should look into it, make sure that your website supports metadata rather than destroying it. And in many cases, probably most cases, if indeed you need to fix that problem, it's a really easy fix. And you can go on my blog to look it up. I've written about it many times. But let's pop back to Photoshop and let's just assume that we were working on a picture and we want to do metadata for this picture right here, right now in Photoshop. Well, there are a couple of limitations. I alluded to that earlier. The first is totally obvious. This is a one-at-a-time proposition. Photoshop is an editor. It works on one image at a time. Generally, when we talk about metadata editors, we talk about working on whole folders full of images or hundreds of images in one go. And we have really effective and efficient tools to do that. But the tool that's in your hand has a lot going for it. Photoshop's other limitation is a little bit less obvious, but it's a little bit more serious. In Photoshop, in order to work on a photo, to add metadata to a photo or do anything else with the photo, you have to open it. When you're done, you have to save the file. That means that if you're working on a lossy compressed file, a JPEG, in other words, you've only got one shot at this. You can't open a JPEG up and save it over and over again. You'll see serious quality loss if you do that. Normally, metadata editors have the ability to write into the headers of lossy files without disturbing the image at all. So you can indeed edit metadata, save it, move on, go back and edit metadata as often as you want without destroying the quality of your picture. That is something that you really have to keep in mind if you're doing metadata in Photoshop. Now, that's not a worry if you're working with lossless files, basically TIFFs or PSDs. Those files you can open and close as many times as you want, and it's all just fine. And for metadata purposes, if you're working on a file and, shall we call it the master file, is a PSD or a TIFF, do the metadata there, and if you save it out as a JPEG later, the JPEG will inherit the metadata from the original file. So let's do this. If we go to File in the main menu, and we can come down to File Info, we can see that we have a keystroke here, and this used to be back in the day, and we'll have a brief hate on Adobe moment because they do a lot of stuff like this nowadays and it really annoys me. Back in the day, Control or Command I would open the metadata dialog. Now, if you're into the keystroke on a Mac, it's Shift Option, Command, I, which on a PC would be Shift, Alt, Control, I. I scarcely even have that many fingers. And you'll notice here on my copy of Photoshop, I've actually made a button mode action to open the file dialog. And here it is. This is not a terribly convenient thing. We'll get that off our chest right now. But we have a tabbed or paned, I guess it's a tabbed dialog here. And we can choose various views of the metadata. Okay, fine. A lot of programs do this. In this basic view, for example, we have a place where we can type our caption. We have a place where we can do keywords. We have a place where we can do our copyright notice. And we can go down and we have other views of our metadata. And here, this one is the one that we'll probably use the most because this contains all the metadata from the IPTC basic core schema. These other views are the same fields, but wait, this is Adobe. Look here, we have this field here called Copyright Info URL, and it only appears on this basic tab. We're going to need that one. So that's pretty annoying. The good news here, though, is that that's a field that we're going to incorporate into our template, and we won't have to touch it much, if ever, after we do that once. So templates. This is maybe the most important concept, the best piece of advice I can give you in the whole world of doing metadata for your pictures is put all your repetitive data, all that stuff about the copyright notice and your contact information and, of course, your name and all of those things. Put them in a template and apply them to your photos so they'll automatically be stamped on. Not only does that save an incredible amount of time and trouble, it also works. And trying to fill out all of those things one at a time does not work, particularly for creative visual people. Human beings generally are not good at doing repetitive clerical tasks over and over again, tens of thousands of times. So trust me, nobody can type this stuff and get it right all the time, even if you want to use a template. So, okay, fine. We're going to go here and we're going to go to our templates pull down at the bottom of our metadata dialog. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to pull up this demo template. And on this channel, we have a couple of imaginary photographers, Joe and Susie Photographer. And we use demo templates with their metadata a lot. And in fact, this demo template is available for download in the description down below, and it's a starter template. You can download it, look at Joe's information, edit it so that it reflects your information and what your needs are, and save it out to be your own template. In any case, in order to apply this template in Adobe Photoshop, we have a dialog here, which is actually a cool thing. It's ironic because we're working here in a program with very limited metadata abilities. This is actually a really sophisticated thing. Go figure. Anyway, we have three options for our template. Option 1 is we simply clear whatever is in the dialog and we replace it with our template. We have option 2, which keeps anything that's in the dialog that's blank in our template, but any field that's included in our template replaces whatever might be in the dialog. You probably don't need to worry about that. That's a pretty sophisticated option that is very strange to see in a program that doesn't have much to do with metadata. And option 3 is we can keep all the information that's in the dialog now, and we can append the information from our template to it. And that's a really powerful thing if you're working with multiple images, but guess what? Photoshop can only work on one image at a time, so that's a little strange. Anyway, we will OK that, and here we go. We've loaded Joe Photographer's template. And this is all the stuff that Joe Photographer puts on every picture that he does. And good news for us, those cool Google features that are driven by metadata are all driven by template metadata. This is all stuff that you will have to do really only once. In a normal metadata editing application, you'd broadcast it across whole folders full of images in one click, or in many of them without even clicking at all. You can just completely automate it. Here in Photoshop, we're working one image at a time, but still, it's pretty cool. The information is here, including the information that we need for those Google fields. So let's take a look at what that is. I'll pop over here to the main IPTC tab, and we can see that Joe Photographer has put in his name in the creator field. Okay, cool. We have some contact information fields for Joe, and he's got his physical address in here. He's got his business phone number in here. He's got his email in here. He's got his website address. Many photographers do this just the way Joe did this. They conscientiously fill out each and every one of these fields. And the motivation is pretty obvious. If someone wants to chase him down to give him money, they want to make it as easy as possible. Now, I don't particularly want to be spammed, so I don't put my email in this thing. So that's completely your choice, seasoned to taste. I do my business phone number in most of my templates. I do my website address in all of my templates. But I just kind of keep it simple, and I don't use all these fields. Nothing that says you have to. We have placeholders here in this stanza, which is about where the picture was made. Many people, myself included, will leave the country and maybe the state and province field pre-filled. Maybe even the city if you always work in the same city or usually work in the same city. It'll just save you some keystrokes. Here we have the description field. This is our caption. And here we have already there Joe Photographer's inline byline. And unless you're working for a client that doesn't want you to do it, I highly recommend that you include an inline byline, because it's entirely possible that the caption field is the only metadata that somebody will ever see for your photo. And as we slide down here a little more, we see Joe's initials telling us that Joe is indeed the person who wrote the caption for this photo. And here we have Joe's copyright notice. All right, this is a biggie. This is one of those fields that appears right on the preview page in Google Images. And you can see here, since Joe doesn't really exist, and I really did this, that Joe has included his business phone number right in his copyright notice. Okay, so there's one of the Google fields taken care of. Another one is completely obvious. That is your name, Joe Photographer's name, right there in the creator field. That's like the most obvious of all possible things. Now, Joe, in this particular template, has filled in a value here in the credit field, which is the credit line field in Photoshop. He's filled in the name of the studio that he co-owns with his imaginary sister, Susie. Okay, that's fine, but bear in mind that it's entirely likely that you don't need to put a value there at all. And Google won't be hurt or offended if you leave that blank. Now, what about that licensable badge? Okay, there are 3 fields that you need to fill out if you want the licensable badge and you want it to work properly. The first of those fields is a really common field, and most people would put it right here. It would be right here next to the copyright notice. Weirdly, in Adobe Photoshop, it's back here on the basic page. Here it is, right here. It's the copyright URL field. So it's odd that it's here, but we know that it's here. All we have to do is fill it out correctly, and Google is going to give us our licensable badge. And again, it's a templated field, so once we have it filled out, we don't care what page it's on. It's just going to be there. We don't have to worry about it. So in this field is technically in the IPTC standard known as the Web Statement of Rights. It's the copyright URL field in almost all software that supports IPTC metadata. In any case, it basically has to point a viewer back to you. You could point to your home page here, and that would probably be just fine. In Joe's case, Joe has pointed to a specific page on his website that he calls Licenses. It's a landing page. Again, this is something that I recommend. Given that Joe doesn't really exist, it's not surprising that he did it that way. The other thing that we need to take a look at that is important here, according to Google's documentation, Joe has done his URL in the completely qualified form. He's included the protocol, HTTP or HTTPS, a colon and a couple of slashes, and if your website has, some don't, some do, If it actually has the www dot at the beginning of it, you need to include that too. According to Google, if all this stuff is not here and in correct form, the link on your licensable badge won't work. Let's take a look at this landing page thing that Joe has chosen to use. We'll hop over to my own website, and here's a landing page that I made for just this purpose. Very, very easy. Seriously, we're looking at 15 or 20 minutes work here, most of which was finding the image that works in that banner shape. So this is my licenses landing page, and it just says, all rights reserved. We don't have to be surgically precise here. 99% of the time, any image of mine that you find floating around on the internet is indeed all rights reserved. And if not, hey, I'll let you know. You want to publish one of my photos? Get in touch. We'll work it out. I have a contact link. It's the normal contact link from my webpage. If that doesn't do it for you, if you're in more of a hurry, feel free to call me on my business phone number. A few of my photos are licensed under Creative Commons, and I have a separate landing page just for Creative Commons pictures. And there's a paragraph here thanking you for being an honest person and getting in touch with me. And I'm sincere about that. That is the whole point of all of this metadata stuff, is to encourage and support honest people. Some people think that the web statement of rights page needs to be a very technical recitation of exactly what licenses might be available, which is an impossible task because we don't know necessarily when we're first working up a picture under what terms it might be available, and that's going to change later. You could call me up and ask to license a picture, and maybe that picture's bought out. Maybe I can't license it to you. Maybe I don't want to license it to you. For that matter, if an honest person calls up and asks me to license a picture, depending on my mood, it's entirely possible I'll just zap him out an email and give him the license for free. So there's the landing page. Now, the Google Images Licensable button or badge has a feature that's intended to be specific to a particular image. You can click through, and the intention is to click through to an e-commerce page like a photo agency would have, where you could buy the picture right then and there. Well, whether or not we have an individual page for each picture, we want to make all avenues that might lead a prospective customer to our doorstep an easy trip. So we want to turn on that part of Google Images Licensable as well. In order to do that, we'll go to this tab, the IPTC Extension tab, and we'll slide down to the bottom, and we'll find a field down here called Licensor. Licensor is actually an array, and if we double-click in it, it's going to open up the array for us, and we're going to have a whole bunch of subfields, two of which we care about for Google Images Licensable. This one, the web address, and this is the licensor URL, is what this field is really called, is indeed the address that we want to send somebody who's interested in this particular picture to. In our case, 99% of us, 99% of the time, that same landing page or even the home page of our website will do just dandy. Same rules apply. https://www and all that nonsense. Google wants a full URL in that field. Google also wants the name of the licensor of the photo, which could be your name, it could be your agent's name, it could be a company name, who knows. They're going to use that as a label for the licensor feature. So we're going to provide it to them. That's just common sense. The rest of this array is just contact information. So let's put some contact information in here. It's certainly not going to hurt. And Joe has put in his phone number. You could do your phone number. You could do a contact email address. You can do a physical address. Season to taste. Once you've done this once, you don't have to worry about it anymore, and you can just go ahead and close this part of the dialog. Okay, before we move on to actually captioning this particular picture, let's get our template situation completely straightened out. So we have, at this point, or at least we're pretending, that we've edited all the information in this starter template, changed Joe's information to our information, and we want to make a usable template out of this. So we'll go down to the bottom of the dialog, and we'll go to the templates flyout. In the templates flyout, we want to choose export. We then get a Save As dialog, and indeed by default, Photoshop is offering to save this template for us right in our templates folder. How very convenient. So we'll save the template as something like my template and tell Photoshop to go ahead and save it. If we had saved our template to the desktop or something like that, we could go back to the same flyout and we could choose template folder, and lo and behold, there is our template folder opened up. All we have to do is drag it in. Any template that's in the templates folder will appear in this flyout, and all we have to do is choose it to apply to a different picture. So okay, we already have our Joe Photographer template applied to this picture. So we'll go back to our main IPTC page in the template here, and we'll just give this picture a caption. This is a caption about watering the garden. Okay, it's not a terribly good caption, and of course, because it's me, it's got at least one typo in it. And we have our inline byline already done right here. And right here, we have our keywords field. So if we want to add some keywords, and keywords are just search terms that aren't necessarily already in your caption that might be useful when you go to look for this picture later, or for other people when they go to look for the picture later. Keywording is a nuanced topic, and there's a lot on my blog and on this channel about keywording if you're interested. But anyway, we'll add a couple of keywords. We'll say gardening. Gardening. That's a good keyword. And a comma and a space, and we'll say irrigation and plants. Okay, you get the idea. So now we have keywords. All right, we're fine. We okay this dialog. It will apply that metadata to our picture, and it'll be there, if I can remember the keystroke again. Here we go. And there we have it. Here's the caption that we put on the picture. It's all good to go, and everything is fine. Now, this picture is a TIFF, so if I want to, I can open it up and I can resave that caption again. Or if I want to, I can go ahead and do a Save As on this picture, and I'll call it watering. And we'll go ahead and save this picture out as a JPEG. This is pretty logical if we're going to send this picture out anywhere. This might be, indeed, the way we go about it. I'll go ahead and save the picture. Okay, fine. And now, if I open our watering picture back up again, and go back to our metadata dialog, there we go. The JPEG has inherited the metadata from the original TIFF. So all is good. So that's about it. That's how you can work with metadata in Photoshop. Yeah, some parts of the process are not quite as smooth and slick or as powerful as they might be, but you know what? If we wanted Photo Mechanic functionality, there's an easy way to take care of that. Buy a copy of Photo Mechanic. Most of us have and use Photoshop, and this is a resource that's right at our fingers. It might come in very handy one day. So, if you have comments or questions, reach out in the comments down below, or in the comments on my blog, or from the contact page on my blog, or through social media, and I'll be happy to help out. If you have a website and you're interested to find out if your website is properly honoring metadata or not, that's a really important thing, and I will be especially happy to help out. Now, as I record this series of videos, there's an epidemic going on. So seriously, folks, be careful, stay safe out there, and until next time, mind your metadata.